The Boston summer heat was unbearable, pressing down on our little apartment like a heavy blanket, even though the air conditioning was humming away at full power. I was sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of me, trying to focus on a new client pitch for work. Sweat bead on my forehead, and I wiped it away with the back of my hand, muttering to myself about how the numbers just weren't adding up. That's when Claire's voice floated in from the kitchen, cutting through the drone of the AC unit. "Liam, your mom texted." She called out, and I didn't even need to ask which mom she meant. It was Judith, my mother-in-law, not my own mother. Judith had a way about her, always polite, always proper. But there was something underneath it all that never quite sat right with me. "She wants us over Sunday to celebrate your birthday," Clara added, and I could hear the strain in her voice, like she was trying to sound cheerful but couldn't quite pull it off. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath, and rubbed my eyes. Another birthday. I'd be turning 36. And honestly, I wasn't much for celebrations anymore. Work had been eating up my time, and all I really wanted was a quiet day with Clara. Maybe some takeout, a cold beer, and a movie on the couch. But Judith had other plans, as always. She loved hosting, loved putting on a show, and I knew saying no wasn't really an option. "What did you tell her?" I called back, already guessing the answer. Clara stepped into the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bond. She gave me a small, tired smile. I said we'd be there. "It's your birthday, Liam," she insisted. I nodded, not surprised. Clara always agreed to these things, even when she didn't want to. She did it for me, and I loved her for it, even if it meant another awkward afternoon with her mom. The truth was, Judith and Clara didn't get along. Not really on the surface. Everything was fine. Judith would smile, offer compliments, ask about Clara's freelance design work with that syrupy tone of hers. But I'd seen the way her eyes tighten when Clara talked, the little dig. She'd slip into conversations about how Clara must be so busy or how she didn't understand all that artsy stuff. Clara never said much back, just nodded and kept her cool. But I could tell it got to her. I'd asked her about it once late at night when we were lying in bed, the city buzzing outside our window. "Does it bother you?" I'd said, my arm draped over her. She shrugged, staring up at the ceiling. "It's just how she is. I deal with it." That was Clara. Strong, steady, always putting up with more than she should. I pushed the pitch papers aside and stood up, stretching my stiff back. The apartment smelled like the lemon cleaner Clara had used earlier, mixed with the faint heat of the day seeping through the walls. I walked over to the kitchen, where she was rinsing a glass in the sink, her shoulders a little hunched. "You sure you're okay with this?" I asked. Leaning against the counter, she glanced at me, her hazel eyes catching the light. "It's fine, Liam. It's one day. We'll go eat some cake and come home." She paused, then added with a smirk, "Besides, you know she'd never let me hear the end of it." If we skipped, I laughed a short, dry sound. That was true. Judith had a way of holding on to things, turning them into polite little guilt trips that lingered for weeks. I stepped closer and put my hand on her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin under my fingers. "Thanks," I said quietly. "I know it's not your favorite thing." She turned off the tab and faced me, her smirk softening. "It's your birthday. I'll survive." There was a beat of silence, and then she leaned in and kissed me quick, her lips soft against mine. It was a small moment, but it steadied me. I knew she wasn't thrilled about Sunday, and I wasn't exactly jumping for joy either. But we'd get through it together. That's how we worked. The rest of the afternoon slipped by in a blur. I went back to my pitch, tweaking numbers and rewriting lines until my head ached. Cla disappeared into her little office nook, sketching something on her tablet, her headphones on. Every now and then I'd glance over at her, watching the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated. She was beautiful like that, focused and in her own world. I thought about Sunday again. Judith's pristine house, the fancy table settings. She'd pull out the way she'd hover over us with that force smile. It'd be fine, I told myself. Just a few hours. But deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be as simple as cake and small talk. Judith always had a way of stirring things up, even when she didn't mean to. Or maybe, especially when she did. By the time evening rolled around, the heat had eased a little, and the apartment felt almost livable again. I ordered us some pizza, and we ate it straight from the box on the couch, laughing about some dumb joke. I'd made it work. Clara's laugh was light, and it loosened something in my chest. "You think your mom will have one of those giant cakes again?" she asked, picking a piece of pepperoni off her slice. "Probably," I said, grinning. "Make a big deal out of it, like I'm still turning 10. Clara shook her head, still smiling. She loves that stuff. Yeah, she did. And I guess in her own way. Judith thought she was doing something nice. I just wished it didn't always feel like there was a catch. The day before the dinner at Judith's, I was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to unwind from a long week. The apartment was quieter than usual. Clara was out picking up a few things for her latest design project, and the hum of the A was the only sound keeping me company. The Boston heat hadn't let up, and even with the curtains drawn, I could feel it pressing against the windows. I was just about to get up and grab a beer when the doorbell buzzed, sharp and loud. I frowned, not expecting anyone, and hauled myself off the couch, my bare feet sticking slightly to the hardwood floor as I shuffled to the door. When I opened it, a courier stood there, a young guy in a faded blue uniform holding a small refrigerated box. "Liam Harper?" he asked, glancing at his clipboard. "Yeah, that's me," I said, confused. He handed me the package, cool to the touch, and pinned a sign for it. I scribbled my name and he was gone before I could even ask who it was from. I shut the door and turned the box over in my hands. The label caught my eye. May Own Chocolate. My eyebrows shot up. I'd heard of the place. Some fancy chocolate here up in New England that charged more for a single truffle than I'd spend on a whole meal. Who'd send me something like this? Clara's key turned in the lock just then, and she stepped inside, arms full of shopping bags. "Hey," she said, kicking the door shut behind her. Her eyes landed on the box in my hands, and she tilted her head. "What's that?" I held it up still, a little stunned. "No idea, just got delivered. It's from May Own Chocolate." She set her bags down on the counter and came over, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Judith sent this," she asked, her voice lifting with surprise. I shrugged, peeling off the shipping label to check. Sure enough, there it was, Judith Lancaster. Her name in the dress printed neatly in the cinder spot. "Apparently," I said, shaking my head. "Guess it's an early birthday thing." Clara raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "That's extravagant, even for her." I couldn't argue with that. Judith loved grand gestures, but this was next level, even for her. I set the box on the coffee table and grabbed a pair of scissors SC from the kitchen drawer. "Let's see what's inside," I said, curiosity tugging at me. Clara leaned in as I cut through the tape, her shoulder brushing mine. The cold air hit us as I lifted the lid, revealing a sleek black velvet box nestled in some kind of fancy foam padding. I popped it open and there they were. Rows of perfect glossy truffles, each one looking like a little work of art. The smell hit me right away, rich and sweet like cocoa, and something else I couldn't place. "Holy crap," I muttered, picking up the card tucked inside. It was Judith's handwriting, all loops and flourishes, impossible to mistake. "Specially selected, just for you." It read, signed with her usual dramatic J. I held it up for Clara to see, and she scanned it, her lips pressing into that tight little smile. She always got around her mom's stuff. She went all out, she said, her tone flat. I nodded, setting the card down. Yeah, guess she really wants to make this birthday a big deal. Clara didn't say anything else, just gave me that look, half amused, have something I couldn't read, and turned back to unpack her bags. I sat there for a minute staring at the truffles. They looked too good to be real, almost too pretty to eat. Part of me wanted to crack one open right then and there. But I figured I'd save them for later, maybe after dinner or something. You want one? I asked Clara, holding the box out. As she shoved a sketchbook into her back, she glanced over her shoulder and shook her head. No, I'm good. Those are yours. There was a little edge to her voice, nothing big, but enough that I noticed. I let it go, though. Clara wasn't big on sweets anyway, and I didn't want to push. The rest of the day went by slow and easy. Clara disappeared into her office to work, and I flipped on the TV, half watching some home improvement show. While my mind wandered, the chocolate box sat there on the table, pulling my attention. Every few minutes I kept thinking about Judith, why she'd sent something so fancy, so out of the blue. She'd always been nice to me. Maybe too nice sometimes, like she was trying to prove something. I figured it was just her way of keeping things smooth, especially with how rocky things got between her and Clara. Still, it felt off too much somehow. By the time evening rolled around, Clara came out of her office, stretching her arms over her head. I'm beat, she said, yawning. Think. Call it a night soon. I nodded, glancing at the clock, barely past 8. You okay? I asked. Sitting up a little, she waved me off. Just a long day, deadlines. I watched her shuffle toward the bedroom, her socks whispering against the floor, and felt a pang of guilt. She'd been pushing herself hard lately, and here I was lounging around with a box of overpriced chocolates I didn't even ask for. After she disappeared behind the bedroom door, I leaned back and stared at the box again. The house was quiet now, just the low hum of the TV and the occasional car horn outside. I told myself I'd wait. Maybe bring the truffles to Judith's tomorrow to share. It'd be a nice gesture, right? Show some appreciation. But the more I looked at them, the more I wondered what they tasted like. Like just one couldn't hurt. I thought Clara wouldn't care, and Judith wouldn't know. I reached for the box, my fingers brushing the velvet, and hesitated something about. It felt like a decision, though I couldn't say why. In the end, I pulled my hand back and flipped the channel instead. They could wait for now. At least, I'd let them sit there. A little mystery wrapped in black velvet, courtesy of my ever-gracious mother-in-law. That night, after Clara went to bed, the apartment felt too still, like the air itself was holding its breath. She'd had a rough day. Her design clients were piling on revisions, and I could see the exhaustion in the way she dragged herself to the bedroom, barely saying goodnight. I stayed up, sprawled on the couch, the TV flickering with a baseball rerun. I wasn't really watching. The Red Sox were losing as usual, and the announcer's voice droned on about missed chances. My mind wasn't on the aim, though. It kept drifting to that black velvet box sitting on the coffee table, the one Judith had sent. Those truffles were calling to me, and I couldn't shake the itch to find out what made them so special. I tried to ignore it. At first, I got up, grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen, and paced around a little if the floor cool under my feet. The apartment smelled faintly of Clara's lavender candle, the one she'd lit earlier to unwind, but it wasn't enough to distract me. Every time I sat back down, my eyes landed on that box. It was just sitting there, all fancy and untouched, like it was daring me to do something about it. Specially selected, just for you. Judith Snow had said, I snorted to myself. She probably spent a fortune on them, and here I was letting them go to waste. What was the harm in trying one? I reached for the box, my fingers brushing the soft velvet, and flipped it open. The smell hit me again. Deep, rich cocoa with a hint of something sharp, maybe hazelnut or coffee. The truffles gleamed under the dim light of the lamp, each one perfect, like little jewels. I picked one up, rolling it between my fingers. It was cool, smooth, almost too pretty to eat. But my stomach ground, and my curiosity went out. I popped it into my mouth and bit down. The shell cracked and the inside melted across my tongue. Silky sweet, with a kick of something bitter that made my eyes widen. Holy crap, that was good. Better than good. It was the best chocolate I'd ever tasted. Hands down, one wasn't enough. I grabbed another, then another, savoring the way they melted, the flavors shifting. With each bite, dark cocoa, a hint of caramel, something fruity I couldn't name. Before I knew it, I was halfway through the box, crumbs dusting my shirt, my fingers sticky. I leaned back, grinning like an idiot, the game forgotten. "Judith, you outdid yourself," I muttered, wiping my hands on my jeans. I didn't even feel guilty. Clara didn't want any. Earlier, she'd said so herself, and these were mine, right? A birthday gift. I observed this after the week I'd had. The box was looking pretty empty now, and I paused, staring at the last few truffles. Maybe I should save some, I thought. Bring them to Judith's tomorrow. Show her I appreciated it. But then I pictured her face, that smug little smile she'd get like she'd double you something by impressing me. No, I decided. These were too good to share. I popped another one in my mouth, closing my eyes as it melted, and let out a contented sigh. The TV buzzed on, the crowd cheering faintly. But I was in my own world now, lost in the taste of it all by the time I finished the last one. The box was a mess of crumpled wrappers and smudge velvet. I sat there staring at it, a little stunned. "Whoops," I said out loud, my voice cutting through the quiet. I'd eaten the whole damn thing, every single truffle. My stomach felt heavy, but I couldn't bring myself to care. It wasn't like Clara would mind. She'd probably laugh if she saw me like this, covered in chocolate crumbs, like a kid who'd raided the candy jar. I brushed off my shirt, tossed the empty box onto the table, and leaned back, feeling full and smug and a little ridiculous. The game ended. Red Sox lost, big surprise, and I flipped off the TV, the room going dark except for the streetlights filtering through the blinds. I should have gone to bed, but I didn't move. My mind kept replaying the taste of those truffles, the way they'd surprised me with every bite. Judith had picked a winner. I give her that. I wondered how much they cost, probably more than I'd ever spend on myself. It was a nice thought, her going out of her way like that made me feel a little warm. Like maybe she really did care, even if she and Clara didn't see eye to eye. I stretched out on the couch, my head resting on the armrest, and stared up at the ceiling. The apartment was silent. Now just the faint hum of the ACC and the occasional creak of the building settling. Clara was probably fast asleep, her breathing soft, and even in the next room I pictured her waking up tomorrow, finding the empty box and shaking her head at me. "You ate them all," she'd say, her voice teasing. I'd shrug, grin, tell her they were too good to resist. She'd roll her eyes, but she wouldn't be mad. That was the thing about Clara. She let me have my moments, even the dumb ones. Eventually, I hauled myself up, my legs heavy, and shuffled to the kitchen to toss the wrappers in the trash. The box I left on the table. Evidence of my little binge. I didn't feel bad, though it was my birthday gift, my night, my indulgence. I brushed my teeth, the cutting through the lingering sweetness, and climbed into bed next to Clara. She didn't stir, her back to me, her hair spilling across the pillow. I lay there for a while, staring at the shadows on the wall, my stomach full, and my mind buzzing. Those truffles were something else. I drifted off thinking about them, the taste still on my tongue. wondering if Judith had any idea how much I'd enjoyed her surprise. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee brewing, the rich, dark scent pulling me out of a heavy sleep. My head felt fuzzy and my stomach was still full from last night's chocolate binge. But I couldn't complain. It was Sunday, my birthday, and for once I didn't have to rush out the door to work. I rolled over, blinking at the sunlight, sneaking through the blinds, and saw Clara's side of the bed empty. She was already up, probably in the kitchen. I stretched, my joints popping, and hauled myself out of bed, tugging on a t-shirt as I shuffled out to join her. She was standing by the counter pouring coffee into 2 mugs, her hair still messy from sleep. Morning, I said, my voice rough. She glanced over with a small smile. Happy birthday, old man. I grinned, leaning against the doorway. Thanks, smells good in here. She slid a mug my way and I took it, wrapping my hands around the warmth. The apartment was quiet, the city outside just starting to hum with Sunday traffic. I said the coffee black, strong, exactly how I liked it, and felt the fog in my head start to clear. Sleep, okay? I asked, watching her stir sugar into her own cup. She nodded. Yeah. You like a rock, I said, which was true, though I didn't mention the truffles probably had something to do with it. We sat at the table, sipping in comfortable silence, the empty chocolate box still sitting on the coffee table in the next room. I kept waiting for her to notice, to say something, but she didn't. Maybe she hadn't seen it yet. I wasn't worried, though she'd laughed when she found out my phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the quiet, and I groaned. Who's that at this hour? I muttered, getting up to check. The screen lit up with Judith's name. Of course, I swiped to answer, putting it on speaker so Clara could hear. Happy birthday, Liam. Judith's voice came through, bright and syrupy, the way it always was when she wanted to sound cheerful. Hey, Judith, thanks, I said, leaning against the counter. Did the chocolates arrive? She asked, and I could picture her sitting in her pristine kitchen, probably sipping tea from one of those fancy cups she loved. They did, I said. Glancing at Clara, she raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was still half asleep. Maybe I just wanted to mess with Judith a little, but I added, Clara ate them all. There was a long pause on the other end, so quiet. I thought the call dropped. Claire's head snapped up, her eyes wide, which she mouthed, but I just grinned and shrugged. Then Judith's voice came back, shaky, almost trembling. What, are you serious? Before I could laugh it off or tell her I was kidding, the line went dead. She'd hung up. I stared at the phone, confused. That was weird, I said, setting it down. Clara was still looking at me, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her mouth. Why'd you say that? She asked, her voice sharp. I scratched the back of my neck. Sue, I don't know, thought it'd be funny. She didn't take it. Well, Clara didn't laugh. She set her mug down hard enough that a little coffee soused over the side. Liam, that's not like her. She sounded off. I frowned, repping the call in my head. Judith did sound strange, but I figured she was just annoyed. I'd ruined her big gesture. Check fine, I said, waving it off, probably mad. I didn't gush about how great they were, but then my phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire's name on the screen. I picked it up, confused. You're right here, I said, showing her. She grabbed her own phone from her pocket, frowning. I didn't call you. I answered anyway. Hello? Clark's voice came through, breathless, panicked. Liam, what did you tell my mom? I blinked, looking at the Clara sitting across from me, who was just as confused as I was. That you ate the chocolates, I said slowly while there was a pause. Then, her voice again, quieter. Liam, something's wrong. The call cut out. I set the phone down, my heart starting to thud. Clara, the real Clara, the one in front of me, stood up, her face pale.
"What the hell was that?" she asked.
Her voice was shaking. "I don't know." I said, my mouth dry, "That was your voice, but you didn't call me." We stared at each other, the air in the room feeling heavier than it had a minute ago. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was it a prank? A glitch? But Judy, reaction that tremble in her tone, it stuck with me. "Call her back," I said, nodding at Claire's phone. She dialed, her fingers trembling, but it went straight to voicemail. "She's not picking up." Clara said, her eyes locked on mine. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Okay, let's not freak out. Maybe she's just, I don't know, upset about the chocolates. It's Judith. She overreacts." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Something was off, and I could feel it in my gut. A cold twist that had nothing to do with the coffee. Clara shook her head. "No, Liam. That call? My voice? It wasn't me." And Mom sounded scared, not mad. She was right. I replayed Judith's words the way her voice cracked. This wasn't about me teasing her. This was something else. I walked over to the coffee table, grabbed the empty chocolate box, and turned it over in my hands. The velvet was smudged, the wrappers gone, but the label was still there. Mayonnaise chocolate. Judith's name, her address. Maybe it's nothing. I said more to myself than to Clara. Maybe she's just being dramatic. But Clara didn't answer. She was staring at her phone, her knuckles weight white around it. "Liam," she said quietly, "what if it's not nothing?" I didn't have an answer for that. All I knew was the morning had started out normal coffee, a lazy Sunday, my birthday. And now it felt like something was unraveling, something I couldn't quite see. Yet Clara came home early that afternoon, and the second I saw her face, I knew something was seriously wrong. She burst through the door, her keys clattering onto the counter, her skin pale like she'd seen its ghost. I was on the couch, still shaken from that weird phone call earlier, my half-finished coffee cold on the table. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling as she dropped her bag by the door. "My mom just called me." I sat up, my stomach tightening. What did she say? Clara crossed the room and sank into the chair across from me, her hands twisting together. She sounded terrified, kept asking if I was okay, if I'd eaten anything strange. Then she just hung up. I stared at her, trying to process it. Judith, terrified. That didn't fit. She was always so put together, so in control. Even when she was annoyed, she'd mask it with that polite smile of hers. "Wait, slow down," I said, leaning forward. "This is about the chocolates, isn't it? What I told her this morning." Clara nodded, her eyes wide. "I think so." She wouldn't say much, just kept repeating, "You didn't eat them, did you? Like it was life or death." My chest felt tight, and I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the growing onise. "I don't get it. I ate them, not you. Why is she freaking out about you?" That's when it hit me. Not like a thought, but like a punch to the gut. My stomach twisted sharp and sudden, and it wasn't just nerves. A cold sweat broke out across my back, soaking through my shirt, and I gripped the arm of the couch to steady myself. Liam, Claire's voice cut through the haze, sharp with worry. She was on her feet, now crossing to me. "You okay?" I tried to answer, but the room tilted, the edges blurring. "I don't feel right." I managed my words, slurring. Her hands were on my shoulders, cool against my clammy skin. "Sit back," she said, pushing me gently into the cushions, but sitting didn't help. The nausea came fast, a wave so strong I doubled over, clutching my stomach. "Oh my God, Liam," Clara gasped, kneeling in front of me. I could barely focus on her face. Everything was spinning. my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. "I'm calling 911, she said, scrambling for her phone. I wanted to tell her no, that I'd be fine, but the words wouldn't come. My mouth tasted bitter, metallic, and the pain in my gut was like nothing I'd ever felt. Sharp, burning, relentless. I slumped sideways, my head hitting the armrest, and Claire's voice faded in and out as she shouted into the phone. "Yes, my husband, he's sick, really sick, please hurry." The next few minutes were a blur. I kept slipping, my mind foggy, 1 second sharp the next. Clara stayed with me, her hand gripping mine, her voice shaking as she tried to keep me awake. "Liam, stay with me, okay? They're coming. Just hold on." I nodded, or thought I did, but my body wasn't listening. My vision tunneled, the apartment shrinking to a pinprick of light, and all I could think about was those damn chocolates. What was in them? That question looped in my head over and over as the nausea surged again. I barely made it to the edge of the couch before I threw up a violent heave that left me gasping, my throat raw. The paramedics arrived fast boots, thewing voices loud and clipped. "What happened?" One of them asked a guy with a buzz cut and a stethoscope around his neck. Claire's words tumbled out frantic. "He ate some chocolates last night, a whole box. Then he started feeling sick. Just now, please help him." They moved me onto a stretcher, my limbs heavy and useless, and I caught a glimpse of Clara's face. White, terrified tears streaking her cheeks. "I'm coming with you," she told them, grabbing her bag. And they didn't argue. The ambulance ride was hell. The siren wailed, lights flashing through the windows. And I lay there, strapped down, an oxygen mask pressed over my face. The paramedic beside me kept asking questions. When did I eat them? How many? How I felt. But my answers were mumbles half-formed. My stomach churned, my head pounded, and that cold sweat wouldn't stop. Clara sat near my feet, her hand on my leg squeezing tight. "You're going to be okay," she kept saying, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I wanted to believe her, but that question kept clawing at me. What was in those chocolates? At the hospital, they wheeled me straight into the ER. The lights blinding, the noise overwhelming. Doctors and nurses swarmed, hooking me up to machines, sticking and 4 in my arm. I faded in and out, catching snippets. Clara's voice, a doctor saying something about stabilizing him, the beep of a monitor. When I came to again, I was in a bed, the room quieter, Chloe beside me. My stomach still ached, but the nausea had eased and my head wasn't spinning anymore. "Hey," I croaked, my throat dry. She grabbed my hand, her eyes red. "Hey, you scared the hell out of me. What happened?" I asked, my voice weak. She swallowed hard. "They don't know. Yet, they're running tests. Said it's not normal food poisoning. Something worse." Worse. That word sank in heavy and cold. I thought about the chocolates, the way I'd eaten every last one, how good they tasted, and Judith's call, her panic. When I said Clara ate them, "Clara," I said, forcing the words out. "Your mom, she knew something." Her face hardened, her jaw tight. "Yeah, I think so too." I lay back staring at the ceiling, the 4 cold in my arm. The pieces didn't fit yet, but they were starting to line up. Judith sent those chocolates for me, or so I'd thought. But her reaction, her fear, the way she'd asked about Clara. It didn't make sense unless they weren't meant for me, unless something in that box was never supposed to be a gift. My head throbbed, my body weak, but my mind wouldn't stop. What was in those chocolates? I didn't have an answer, but lying there, hooked up to tubes, one thing was clear. Whatever it was, it had almost taken me down, and maybe it still could. The hospital room was cold, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones no matter how many blankets they pile on you. I lay there, hooked up to An-4, the steady drip of fluid keeping me tethered to reality. My stomach still ached a dull throb that reminded me of last night's chocolates with every breath. But the NAA had finally backed off. Clara sat beside me, her chair pulled close to the bed, her hand resting on mine. She hadn't said much since the doctor left, just kept staring at the floor, her lips pressed tight. I could tell her mind was racing. Mine was too. Whatever happened yesterday wasn't an accident, and we both knew it, even if we didn't have the proof yet. A young doctor came not long after, his white coat crisp, his face serious but not unfriendly. He flipped through a chart, his eyes scanning the pages, then looked up at Clara. "We've got some preliminary results," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your husband's showing signs of toxic ingestion, not typical food poisoning, something more specific. We are running more tests to narrow it down." Toxic ingestion. The words hit me like a brick. I glanced at Clara and her face went even paler, if that was possible. "Toxic," she repeated, her voice small like poison. The doctor nodded, cautious. "It's possible. We'll know more soon. For now he's stable, but we need to keep him here." I swallowed, my throat dry, despite the poison. That couldn't be right. Those chocolates were from Judith Fancy. Expensive, sure, but poison. My head spun, and not just from whatever was in my system. Clara squeezed my hand, her fingers trembling. "He ate a box of chocolates last night. She told the doctor a gift from my mom. Could that be it?" The doctor's brow furrowed and he jotted something down. "Could be. Do you still have the packaging?" Clara shook her head. "I looked when we got home earlier. It's gone. I don't know where it went." I frowned, trying to think back. I left the empty box on the coffee table, hadn't I? But I couldn't be sure. Everything after last night was a blur. The doctor left after that, promising updates, and the room fell quiet again. I stared at the ceiling, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. "Clara," I said, my voice raspy, "this doesn't make sense. Why would your mom send me poison chocolates?" She didn't answer right away, just kept rubbing her thumb over my knuckles, her eyes distant. "I don't know," she said finally. "But her called today. She was scared, Liam, like she thought I'd eaten them." That hit me again. Judith's panic when I lied and said Clara had the chocolates. It wasn't annoyance or disappointment. It was fear, real fear. Before I could say anything else, a new voice broke the silence. A deep, steady tone from the doorway. "Mr. Harper, Mrs. Harper." We both looked up. A man stood there, mid-40s, maybe wearing a plain gray suit and a badge clipped to his belt. "I'm Detective Eli Moreno," he said, stepping inside. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Clara nodded, sitting up straighter, and I managed a weak sure. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. His dark eyes, sharp but not unkind. "Hospital called us in." He explained, "Suspected poisonings. Not something we take lightly." "Can you tell me what happened?" Clara took the lead, her voice steadier. Now she told him about the chocolates, how they'd come from Judith, how I'd eaten them all, how I'd collapsed earlier. Moreno listened, scribbling notes, his face unreadable. "Anything unusual about the delivery?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "It was just a courier, normal package, refrigerated, fancy label." He nodded, then turned to me. "You feel anything before today?" After reading them, I thought about it. My head's still foggy. Not really. They were good, great. Even didn't feel sick till this morning. He wrote that down too, then asked, "And the packaging's missing?" "Yeah," Clarice said. I couldn't find it. Moreno tapped his pen against the notebook, thinking, okay, we'll need to track down that chocolate here. See what they say. Anything else stand out to you? I hesitated, then said, Judith, my mother-in-law. She called this morning. Freaked out when I said Claire ate the chocolates. I was kidding, but she didn't take it like a joke. His eyes sharpened at that, and he made another note. Interesting. We'll follow up with her, too. He flipped the notebook shut and slipped it back into his pocket. Rest up, Mr. Harper. We'll figure this out. He gave Clara a nod and left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The room felt heavier after he was gone. Clara let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping poison. Liam, she whispered, this is insane. I squeezed her hand back, my mind churning. Yeah, but why? Why me? She didn't have an answer, and neither did I. Then a memory flickered, something I hadn't thought about it till now. Wait, I said, sitting up a little, wincing at the pole of the 4. Naomi was over, last week. Claire's head snapped up. My sister? I nodded. Yeah, she stopped by. Remember, said she was in the neighborhood, was in and out quick. Claire's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. She didn't ask much, just asked about work, hung out for a bit. I thought back to it. Naomi in her living room, her usual chatter. Nothing out of the ordinary, but the timing stuck with me. Now you think she could have. I didn't finish, but Clara got it. I don't know, she said, her voice hard. But it's weird, right? Her showing up, then this? I nodded, the piece clicking in a way I didn't like. Naomi and Judith were close, closer than Clara was with either of them. If something was up, could she be of it? I lay back exhausted, my body weak, but my mind racing. The chocolates, Judith's call, Naomi's visit. It was all too much to be coincidence, Clara. I said, my voice low. We need to know what's going on, really. No, she nodded, her face set. I'll check the security cam when I get home. The one in the hall, maybe it caught something. I managed a small smile, grateful for her good idea. She squeezed my hand again, her grip firm. Weak. Figure this out, Liam. I promise. I believed her. Whatever was in those chocolates, whatever Judith and maybe Naomi had planned, we weren't letting it go. Not now. Not after this. The hospital room was starting to feel like a cage, the white walls closing in. As the hours dragged on, I lay there still weak, the 4-line tugging at my arm. Every time I shifted, the machines beeped steadily, a rhythm. I couldn't escape, and my head ached from trying to piece everything together. Clara had been by my side most of the day, but I convinced her to go home and check the security camera footage from our hallway. We needed answers, something concrete, and that little cam was our best shot. She'd hesitated, her eyes worried, but I'd squeezed her hand and said, I'm fine. Go. We need to know. She nodded, kissed my forehead and left, promising to be back soon. I was alone now, staring at the ceiling, my mind stuck on Judith and Naomi. The doctor's words, toxic ingestion, kept echoing, and I couldn't shake the image of that chocolate box, all velvet and promise, sitting on our coffee table. I'd eaten every last one, thinking it was just a fancy gift. And now here I was, hooked up to tubes, fighting off whatever they'd done to me. Poison. The word still didn't feel real. Why would Judith send me poison? Or was it even meant for me? Her panic when I'd said Clara ate them. It noted me a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Yet the door creaked open, pulling me out of my thoughts. But it was just a nurse checking my chart. She adjusted something on the floor, gave me a quick smile, and left without a word. I sighed, shifting to get comfortable, though my body still felt like it had been run over. That's when I heard voices, low, muffled, coming from the corridor outside the waiting room nearby. I couldn't make out much at first, just the hum of conversation. But then one voice sharpened, familiar and tense. Naomi. My breath caught, and I strained to listen, my heart thudding against my ribs. He wasn't supposed to eat them all, she whispered, her tone urgent, almost pleading. My stomach dropped. I held my breath waiting, and then Judith's voice cut through sharp and hissed. Be quiet. Don't say another word. The words hit me like a slap, clear as day, even through the wall. I froze my mind, racing to catch up. He wasn't supposed to eat them all. Me. They were talking about me and those chocolates. My hands clenched the thin hospital blanket, knuckles white. This wasn't a mistake or a bad batch from the chocolate. Here they'd meant to do this, but not to me. The way Judith freaked out about Clara, it clicked, cold and ugly. They wanted Clara to eat them. I lay there stunned, my chest tight. Poison wasn't just a possibility anymore, it was real, and it had a target, Clara. My wife, the woman sitting by my bed all day terrified for me, had been the one they were after. Why? What could Judith and Naomi possibly gain from hurting her? My head spun anger, boiling up alongside the confusion. I wanted to rip the 4-out storm out there and demand answers, but my body wouldn't let me. I was stuck, helpless, listening as their voices faded, their footsteps retreating down the hall. The door opened again a while later. Clara, this time her face pale and set, like she'd seen something she couldn't unsee. She didn't even sit, just stood there gripping her phone. Liam, she said, her voice low. I heard them. I nodded, my throat tight. Me too. Naomi and your mom. Outside the waiting room, her eyes widened, and she stepped closer, her hands shaking. What did they say? I swallowed, forcing the words out. Naomi said I wasn't supposed to eat them all. Judith told her to shut up. Clara's breath hitched, and she sank into the chair, her phone slipping onto the bed. Oh my God, she whispered. They tried to poison me. I reached for her hand, my own trembling from weakness and rage. Yeah, I said, my voice rough. That's what it sounds like. She stared at me, her hazel eyes glassy, with tears. She wouldn't let fall. Why? Why would they do this? I shook my head. As lost as she was, I don't know, but they messed up. I ate them instead. She let out a shaky laugh, bitter and broken. You saved me by being a pig. I tried to smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. Guess so. She picked up her phone, her jaw tightening at the camera footage. I checked it. Nothing weird with the delivery, just the courier dropping it off. But the box, it's gone, Liam. I left it on the table this morning, and now it's not there. My mind flashed to Naomi's visit last week. Someone took it. I said, maybe Naomi, maybe Judith, covering their tracks. Clara nodded, her face hardening. They're not getting away with this. I called Detective Moreno on the way back. He's meeting me at the house tomorrow to look closer. Good, I said, my voice firm, despite how tired I felt. We've got proof now. They slipped up talking where you could hear. Moreno nailed them. Clara squeezed my hand, her grip. Fierce. I hope so. I can't believe this, Liam. My own mom, my sister. Her voice cracked, and I pulled her closer, resting my forehead against hers. We'll get through it, I said, meaning every word. They don't get to win. She stayed like that for a while, her breathing steadying against mine. And I held on to her, the only sole thing in this mess. My body ached, my head throbbed, but the anger kept me sharp. Judith and Naomi had tried to take Clara from me.
Whether it was jealousy, money, or something else, I didn't care. They'd failed, and now they pay. I thought about those chocolates again, how I'd eaten everyone, oblivious to what they were. If I hadn't, Clara might be the one in this bed, or worse.
The thought made my stomach turn, but it also lit a fire in me. Whatever their plan was, it was over. We'd make sure of it. The hospital discharged me the next day, but I still felt like a shadow of myself, weak, shaky, like my body wasn't fully mine.
Yet Clara drove us home, her hands tied on the wheel, her eyes flicking to me every few minutes like she was scared I'd collapse again. I didn't blame her. The doctors had stabilized me, said the worst was over, but they still didn't have a full answer on what was in those chocolates. We'll know more when the lab results come back, they told us. And that was that for now. I was just glad to be out of that sterile room, away from the beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. But going home didn't feel safe anymore, not after what we'd heard. Clara had called Detective Moreno that morning, and he'd agreed to meet us at the house with a team to search Judith's place. She barely slept. I could tell dark circles under her eyes, her movements sharp and restless. "We're ending this today," she'd said. As we pulled into our parking spot, her voice hard, I nodded, leaning back in the seat, my head still fuzzy. Yeah, they not getting away with it. She reached over and squeezed my hand, a quick, fierce grip, then got out to help me inside. I hated needing to help, but my legs wobbled and I let her steady me up the stairs to our apartment. Detective Moreno was already there, waiting outside our door with another officer, a woman in uniform, who nodded at us as we approached Mr. Harper. "Mrs. Harper," Moreno said, his gray suit a little wrinkled today. "How you holding up?" I shrugged, leaning against the wall. "Been better ready to figure this out, though." He gave a short nod, his dark eyes steady. "Good. We've got a warrant for your mother-in-law's house. Team's heading there. Now I'll go with you to check it out after we're done here." Clara unlocked the door, her hands steady, despite everything letting do it, she said, and we followed her. Inside, the apartment looked the same, coffee mugs still on the table, my work papers scattered. But it felt different, like someone had been here. Clara went straight to the coffee table where the chocolate box used to be. "It's gone," she said. Turning to Moreno, "I told you it was right here yesterday morning." He nodded, pulling out his notebook. "You're sure no one else has been in?" I thought about it. My mind's sluggish. Not that I know of, just us and Naomi. Last week. Moreno's pen paused. "Your sister?" Clara nodded. "Yeah." She stopped by. Timing suspicious. Right. He wrote that down, his face unreadable. We asked her about it. He and the officer poked around for a bit, checking the trash, the kitchen, even the hallway. Camp footage Clara had saved on her laptop. Nothing new showed up, just the courier dropping off the package. Like she'd said, Moreno rubbed his jaw thinking, "All right, let's on head to Judith's. If there's anything to find, it'll be there." Clara grabbed her bag and I forced myself to stand straighter, ignoring the ache in my legs. "I'm coming too," I said. Clara frowned. "Liam, you should rest." "No," I cut in, my voice firmer than I felt. "I need to see this through." She didn't argue, just nodded, and we piled into Moreno's unmarked car. The officer, following in her own Judith's house, was a half-hour drive. A big, pristine place in the suburbs with a manicured lawn and white shutters. It always looked like something out of a magazine. Too perfect to be real. When we got there, another police car was already parked out front and 2 officers were waiting by the door. Judith and Naomi were at the station. Moreno had made sure of that, getting them brought in for questioning after Clara's call of the house was come. It was empty, quiet, and it gave me the creeps, knowing what we were looking for.
Moreno led the way inside, Warren in hand, and we started searching. The place smelled like lavender and lemon. Polish, everything spotless, Judith style. Clara went straight for the study, a small room off the living area where her mom kept her desk. I followed my steps, slow, leaning on the wall for support. If she hid anything, it'd be here, Clara said, pulling open drawers. I watched her rummage through papers, her hands shaking slightly. And then she froze. "Liam," she whispered, holding up a stack of documents. I shuffled over, peering over her shoulder. Fake health insurance forms, CLA's name on them, listing Judith and Naomi as beneficiaries. My stomach turned. What the hell? She kept digging, her movements frantic now, and pulled out a printout, web searches on top. Toxins, arsenic, highlighted in yellow. Then, in a locked drawer, she pried open with a letter opener. She found the worst of it. A draft of a revised life insurance policy cutting me out entirely, and a second one in my name. My signature forged, dated just last month. Clara's hands shook as she handed them to Moreno, who'd come up behind us. "This is it," she said, her voice breaking. "They were planning this." Moreno scanned the papers, his jaw tight. Motive and EV strong case. He bagged everything, and within hours, Judith and Naomi were arrested. Judith for attempted murder. Naomi as an accessory. Moreno told us later they'd cracked under questioning Naomi, spilling first, claiming it was all Judith's idea. The chocolates were laced with arsenic mint for Clara, a slow dose to make it look like illness. They'd underestimated me, eating them all, throwing their plan off. I sat there listening to Moreno, my head reeling. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law had tried to kill my wife for money control, whatever twisted reason they cooked up, and I'd stumbled into it, nearly dying instead. Clara didn't cry, not then. She just held my hand as we left Judith's house. The evidence in police hands. The truth laid bare. "It's over," she said quietly, her voice steady. Despite the hell we'd been through, I nodded, pulling her close. Yeah, they're done. And as we drove back, the weight of it settled. Not just the betrayal, but the fact that we'd survived it together. The trial came fast, just a couple of months after that day at Judith's house, but it felt like years had crawled by. I was out of the hospital, by then, back on my feet, though I dropped some weight and still got tired. Too quick, the doctors had finally pinned down the arsenic in those chocolates, enough to kill if I'd been smaller or weaker. They said, lucky me. I guess Clara and I had spent those months in a weird limbo, trying to live normal while the case built up. Work, dinner, sleep. They kept us sane. But the shadow of what Judith and Naomi did hung over everything. We didn't talk about it much, just held on to each other. Tighter like that was enough. Court was brutal. I sat in the gallery with Clara every day, my hand in hers, watching Judith try to spin it all into something. It wasn't. She took the stand in her pressed blouse and pearls, looking every bit the gracious mother-in-law I'd once thought she was. It was a misunderstanding, she said, her voice, soft eyes glistening with fake tears. A birthday prank gone wrong. I never meant harm. A prank. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt, remembering the hospital bed, the IVs, the way my body had turned against me. Claire's grip tightened, her nails digging into my palm. But she didn't look away. She stared straight at her mom, her face stone cold. The prosecutor didn't buy it, and neither did the jury. They had the evidence, those forged insurance papers, the arsenic traces, Claire's testimony about overhearing Judith and Naomi at the hospital. The toxicology report was the nail in the coffin, proving the chocolates weren't some innocent mix-up. Judith's lawyer tried to pin it on Naomi, saying she'd acted alone. But Naomi took a plea deal. Early probation in exchange for spilling everything. She sat there in court head down, admitting it was Judith's plan from the start. She wanted Claire on. Naomi mumbled barely audible the money. The house it had all go to us. I felt sick hearing it, knowing they'd valued Khaled's life so cheap. Judith got 6, not enough if you ask me, but it was something. Naomi walked free with her probation, a slap on the wrist that left a bitter taste. The judge's gavel came down, and that was it. Over. At least in the legal sense. Clara didn't say a word. As we left, the courtroom just leaned into me, her shoulders shaking. I wrapped my arm around her, guiding her through the crowd of reporters outside their cameras, flashing no comment. I growled, pushing past, and we made it to the car in one piece. She didn't cry, until we were home, locked inside, and then it came quiet. Broken sobs that tore me up worse than the poison ever did. We decided to leave Boston after that. Too many ghosts, too many memories tied to that apartment, to Judith's house, to the whole damn city. I got released from the hospital 2 weeks after the arrest, and by then we'd already started packing. Clara cut off her family completely. No calls, no letters, nothing. "They're dead to me," she said one night, folding clothes into a box, her voice flat. I didn't argue. How could I? They tried to take her from me, and I'd almost lost everything because of it. We picked a small town in Vermont, quiet and green, far from the Lancaster name and all its poison, literal and otherwise. The move was quick. I found a job with a local investment firm, something steady, less stressed than Boston. Clarice set up her freelance studio, again working from a spare room in our new place, a little house with a porch and a view of the mountains. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and that mattered more than anything. The first few weeks were strange, adjusting to the silence, the slower pace. I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting Judith to show up with that fake smile of hers. But she was locked away, and Naomi was stayed away out of our lives. We were safe. Finally, one evening, as the leaves started turning gold outside, Clara and I sat on the porch with mugs of tea, watching the sun dip below the hills. She'd been quiet all day, lost in her head, and I'd let her. "Be you okay?" I asked, my voice soft. She nodded, staring into her mock. "Yeah, just thinking about it all." I reached over, resting my hand on her knee. "We made it through, Clara. That's what counts." She looked at me then, her hazel eyes softer than they'd been in months. "I know. I just hate that. It happened that they hated me that much." I squeezed her leg, my chest tight. "They didn't deserve you. Never did." She smiled, small but real, and leaned her head on my shoulder. The air was cool, the night settling in, and for the first time in a long time I felt the weight lift just a little. We weren't whole yet, not after everything, but we were getting there. I thought about the trial, the way Judith's face had crumpled when the verdict came down. Justice, sure, but it didn't erase the betrayal. Still sitting there with Clara, I knew we'd want something bigger. They tried to break us, and they'd failed. I kissed the top of her head, breathing her in, and she murmured, "Love you, Liam. Love you too." I said and meant it more than ever. The days after that got easier. I started running again, slow at first, building my strength back. Clara's laugh came more often, her sketches filling the house with color. We were starting over piece by piece, and it felt right. Judith and Naomi were a scar, but scars fade. We'd made it out, and that was enough. We'd been in Maine for a few months now, settling into our new life in a sleepy coast town where the air smelled like salt and pine. The house was small, a weathered gray cottage with a creaky porch and a view of the ocean that stretched out forever. On clear days, I'd landed a job with a local investment firm. Nothing flashy, just Steady work. That let me leave the office behind. At 5, Clara had reopened her freelance design studio, turning the spare bedroom into a chaos of sketchpads and paint tubes. She was smiling again. Not all the time, but enough that I could see the old her creeping back, the woman I'd fallen for years ago. In Boston, it was late October, the kind of crisp autumn day that made the leaves glow red and gold against the gray sky. I'd come home from work early, my tie already loosened, and found Clara in the kitchen humming to herself as she stirred something on the stove. The smell of soup potato maybe filled the air, warm and comforting. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag by the door. She turned her hair tied back with a scarf and gave me that soft smile that still got me every time. "Hey yourself. Good day." I shrugged, leaning against the counter. "Not bad. Quiet you." She nodded, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. "Same, got a logo done for a client. Oh, and this came for you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small card box, no bigger than my hand, and slid it across the counter. I frowned, picking it up. No label, just plain white cardstock, a little worn at the edges. "What's this?" I asked. Glancing at her, she leaned back against the sink, crossing her arms, her smile growing. "You'll want to sit for this," she said, her voice light but teasing. I raised an eyebrow, curious now, and pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Okay, you've got my attention," I said, sitting down and flipping the box open. Inside was a tiny baby onesie, white with little blue letters stitched across the front. "Sweetest surprise coming soon." I stared at it, my brain stalling out, then looked up at Clara. She was watching me, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes bright. I started, my voice catching. She nodded, biting her lip. "We having a baby, Liam." For a second I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Just sat there, the onesie in my hands, the words sinking in. Then it hit me, a rush of joy, so big it nearly knocked me over. "Holy crap," I whispered, standing up so fast, the chair scraped the floor. I crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled her into my arms, lifting her off her feet. She laughed a real, full laugh and wrapped her arms around my neck. "When'd you find out?" I asked, setting her down but not letting go, my hands on her waist. "This morning," she said, her cheeks pink. "Took a test after you left, then another one, just to be sure." I grinned, my heart pounding. "A baby. We're having a baby." She nodded again, and I saw the tears welling up. Happy ones this time. "Best birthday present ever," I said, my voice thick, and she laughed through her own tears. "Your birthday is not for months, dummy. Doesn't matter," I said, kissing her soft at first, then deeper, like I could pour everything I felt into it. We stood there in the kitchen for a while, holding each other, the soup bubbling forgotten on the stove. My mind raced, jumping from one thought to the next. Names, a crib, how we'd tell people, but mostly I just felt full, like everything we'd been through had led to this. "You okay with this?" Claire asked after a bit, pulling back to look at me. "Okay," I said, incredulous. "Clara, I'm over the moon. Are you?" She smiled, resting her forehead against mine. "Yeah, scared. But yeah," I nodded, brushing her hair back. "Me too. We'll figure it out." That night we sat on the porch after dinner, bundled in blankets against the chilly sea breeze. The sky was clear, stars sharp above the water, and I held Clara's hand. Her fingers laced through mine. The soup had been good, potato and leek, she'd said, and we'd eaten it with bread from the bakery down the road, talking about nothing and everything. Now, with the quiet settling in, I looked at her, her profile soft in the dim light. "Not eating those chocolates was the best decision you ever made," I said, half joking. She chuckled, squeezing my hand. And you, eating them all, might have saved both of us. I laughed, the sound low and warm. Yeah, guess I'm a hero now. She rolled her eyes, but her smile stayed. Don't get cocky. We sat there, the waves crashing faintly in the distance, and I thought about it, how close we'd come to losing everything. Judith and Naomi, the arsenic, the hospital. It felt like another life, one we'd left behind. And now this, a baby, a fresh start. It wasn't just luck. It was us fighting through the mess, coming out stronger. You think it's a boy or a girl? I asked, my thumb rubbing over her knuckles. She shrugged, leaning into me. Don't care as long as it's healthy. I nodded, picturing it a little kid running around this house laughing, making a mess. We need a bigger place. Eventually, I said, thinking out loud. Yeah, she agreed. But this is good for now. It was. The cottage was small, but it was home. And it would be home for the three of us soon enough. I kissed her hand, feeling the cool metal of her ring against my lips. Love you, I said, simple and true. Love you too, she murmured, resting her head on my shoulder. The night stretched out, peaceful and ours, and I let myself believe it. This was the sweet we'd earned, the kind no one could take away.